Welcome to Real Herbalism Radio, show 252, recorded at Big Dog Studios in Eugene, Oregon. This show is made possible by, tired of your website not performing the way you want to? Get a free SEO audit at mudpoddesign.com/free-SEO-audit today to find out how they can help you. Change can transform our lives as we're all experiencing through these crazy times. Often radical change helps us make the connections that show our life's passion and sets us on our path. Today we're talking with Rebecca Ingalls, herbalist at Palmer Pond Botanicals and psychotherapist at Swampscott Counseling about connecting with your path through chaotic times. Now here are your hosts.
I'm Candace Hunter.
I'm Patrick Hunter.
And welcome to Real Herbalism Radio. Hey, Rebecca. Welcome.
Hi, Candace. Hi, thank you. Hi, Patrick.
Hi.
Good to see you.
It is always so wonderful to talk to you. And, you know, since we're all doing this remotely, you can be sans mask. Right?
Yes. So freeing. Thank you.
Yeah. You're out on the East Coast and there's some serious mask regulations there.
Yeah. Mandatory mask zones for sure.
Right. Who would have thought, you know, even a decade ago, 20 or 30 years ago, when you were getting started in herbalism, who would have thought that just being in the garden and smelling the plants would be so challenging, right?
Right. So happy that I know to be in the garden and smelling the plants.
Right.
I feel so fortunate. And it's beautiful here in New England. The temperatures are off the charts. It's like in the 70s right now. And the tree, even though we had a drought this summer, the trees are gorgeous. The colors are reds and coppers and golds. Unbelievable.
Gorgeous. Yes. Yeah. So everybody knows we're actually recording this in the fall. So
oops, sorry.
Totally. That's okay. Because, you know, it's been crazy and there's been so much change. I mean, I've noticed even the most basic things have changed in life in ways that I never imagined possible. And your story with starting out with, you know, I mean, you didn't grow up in the garden, right? I mean, at least you didn't, your first connections with plants were not, you know, you grew up in a city, right?
Yeah, I grew up in San Francisco. We did have a little backyard, but it was, pretty much city living, city school. Golden Gate Park was lovely.
Nice.
And going over to the Japanese tea garden was a special treat. And all that was free back then. Can you imagine? The museum, the aquarium, and the tea garden.
Gorgeous.
But on the weekends, we would go up. My dad bought some property up in Guerneville, California. Mm-hmm. And Guerneville was I think it was also known as Stumptown. I think the German I think there were a lot of German immigrants there, and they were cutting the redwoods. So it was called Stumptown because it was covered with redwood stumps. So sad now, knowing what we know. But yeah, we'd play in those as kids. I have 3 siblings, and we'd play in those stumps. They were massive. Could have a whole, playhouse would be a stump of a redwood.
Wow.
Yeah. So foundational and so important, I think, in my evolution.
Right.
Gravity towards trees.
Connection with the trees was part of your, first really serious connections where you started to really recognize the plants, right?
Yeah. My dad was a chiropractor, and this is back in the 60s, and his office was right down near Haight-Ashbury in the summer of love.
Nice.
66, 67, and a little after 67, he moved us up sold our home in San Francisco and moved us up to those hills in Northern California, and he put a little trailer on that property. So we lived in that trailer with no electricity and a family of 6.
Oh, wow.
You can imagine I was outdoors a lot. We still had to go to school, but we had a long walk to school. And my dad would say he was worried about us running into wild boar. And so he instructed us, if we saw a wild boar, to know where the closest tree was and to climb that tree. So, to me, that meant trees were my protectors. Trees were a safety, comfort. I played in the trees. So nice. I felt maybe I was like a child druid in a way.
Nice.
No disrespect to that religion, but very, very tied to the trees. And that was my first.
When you guys first moved out there, did you go kicking and screaming, or were you excited about moving into the middle of nowhere?
I think we were basically in shock. I think my dad had a real transformative, I don't know what was happening. He grew his hair out, he grew a beard. And next thing we know, we're living there.
So your life was completely.
I think we were all in shock, quite frankly. But we'd have a little fire every night, and I remember picking the bay. I guess is it bay laurel up there?
Probably.
Or myrtle, possibly California myrtle.
And there'd be little bayberries, and I remember my brother and I would be stirring those, trying to make some sort of perfume. I don't know what we were doing.
Right.
But
that sounds so romantic and idyllic.
Oh boy.
Right.
I think my mother would have a different story. But I do right now, though. It's true, Candace. I do feel so fortunate. To have had that foundation laid down.
Yeah. So how old were you when you decided to really study the plants?
I think we ended up moving to the East Coast. My parents were both from, my dad was from Cape Cod, my mom from Boston. So we ended up here actually on Cape Cod, and I went through high school there on the Cape. Okay. And then when I went on to college, and I met my first husband, who was a fisherman from Martha's Vineyard.
Oh, wow.
And so I moved to the vineyard with him. I was quite young. I think I was 20. And so we started a life there on Martha's Vineyard. And let's see, I had my daughter in 1983. And I think while I was pregnant with her was when I really started researching, trying to find books and information about, how I was going to care for her. Where my dad was a chiropractor, my mom was actually a registered nurse. She worked at Children's Hospital in San Francisco. However, they did not bring us to the doctor. So that whole world of Western medicine was completely foreign to me.
Oh, wow.
Until I got pregnant. And all I knew was that when a lady is pregnant, what I knew from like TV and books is that you,
you go
to the doctor.
Right.
And so I did that, and it just wasn't jiving. Some of the practices weren't jiving. So I did seek out some, and at that time in my mind, it was alternative healthcare. And I felt very strongly that way. There was a cool health food store on the vineyard. I was so lucky. So I could get like coconut oil, and they even had some essential oils, which I didn't use then, but I was fascinated by that little drawer they had with little bottles in it. It was fascinating to me. So, so that was it. And then raising 2 children. Subsequently, I did divorce that fisherman and moved here to the Boston area and met my now husband, and just continued to study. I never stopped reading and studying. I did Rosemary Gladstar's the art and science of herbalism course.
Nice. And
that was very instructive. But the approach was, study, a lot of flashcards, learn the constituents of the plants and their actions. So carminative, demulcent.
Yeah.
And so it was, it was a good education, but it's just continued to evolve as I raised my kids. And
there's so many different approaches that we can take to remembering all the things the herbs can do, right?
Yeah. It I still felt it was a medical model in a lot of the, in searching out my herbal teachers. And even I studied aromatherapy at the Pacific Institute of Aromatherapy, Kurt Schnellbelt. And that was an intense course. It was a lot of chemistry.
Oh, yeah.
Very fascinating. But there was a lot of the medical model, like this treats this.
Yeah.
And that still didn't kind of jive with, my my whole life experience was not that model, like diagnose and treat.
Right.
And when my daughter was 13, she opted to go back to Martha's Vineyard to live with her father, her biological father. And that was extremely, excruciatingly painful to me.
Oh, God, yeah.
And it rocked my world so much so that I sought help in just dealing with, like, how could this possibly happen?
Right.
Yeah. Because I thought I had been like the most fantastic mother ever. But I also realized that, perhaps that wasn't true. And so I did a lot of work in psychotherapy, something I was always interested in, but I really focused on that for a good solid 10 years and eventually ended up with my own private practice. It was so helpful to me and I learned so much. And it was nothing that I don't think it was anything that I could have. There was no cure for my self-concept and my pain.
Right.
But there was comfort. I continued my work with the plants and it was so comforting. And so the two things have become intertwined right now. And I can't imagine. I have a lot of colleagues I work with who are, very into the therapy side of things and looking at beliefs. And I think that's very important work. I don't think there is any substitute for a healthy self-concept.
Right.
And I see people who work very hard that way, but also I think having the plants for comfort and support and relief is just an extra layer. And also I work with herbalists who know so much about the plants and are, so immersed in their work with the plants, but haven't done the work on self-concept.
Right.
So I see suffering there too. And I just think life's too short to suffer.
Right. One of the things I've loved about watching you evolve over the past couple of years, because we met in BNI, 3 or 4 years ago at this point? It's been a while.
Yeah.
So, and for the uninitiated, BNI is?
Business Networking International.
There you go.
It's a networking group for those of us in any profession, not just herbalists, who want to increase our clientele and increase business. And so you and I both met, despite the fact that we were across the country. We met through BNI. So
I was listening to your podcast.
That was awesome.
I was listening to you and Sue back then. And at one point you had mentioned, I think at one point in one of those episodes, you had mentioned BNI. And I'm like, I'm going to contact her because I had done searches.
Yeah.
Herbalist.
Yes, there was 3 of us. In the entire all of BNI, there were only 3 of us who claimed herbalism as our field.
Yeah. And it was a tough field.
It was really.
I felt it was a tough field. There was a lot of education involved in those in those meetings.
Yeah.
And I'm in a suburb here on the East Coast. I think it's a little different.
Oh, even
out there
here,
where you are.
Even here where we have an herbalist on every block. I mean, we have probably even a professional herbalist on every block. It was still a lot of education in BNI. So
yeah.
Would you like to deepen your connection with herbs? One way is to join the Herbal Nerd Society. As a member, you'll have influence on topics that we dive into the Practical Herbalist and here on Real Herbalism Radio, along with articles that are catered specifically to you, written every month. If you'd like to get more on herbs and know more about herbs, join the Herbal Nerd Society today by visiting herbalnerdsociety.com.
But one of the things I've loved about watching your practices, both of them evolve, is that when I first met you, you kind of kept, therapy and herbalism, you thought of them as separate. And what I've been watching is you're letting go of that boundary. And for me, that's been exciting because my own experience with the plants is that they speak to this deep unconscious or semi-conscious level of ourselves. So they can help us heal on levels that we can't access through talking or through thinking about it. And so they're so deeply healing, and it's powerful.
Yeah, I agree. And I have been thankful for your support. Mm-hmm. You've been a great determinant. And I remember thinking, like, how can I'm all about ethics and mm-hmm. keeping my therapy practice, focused on beliefs. But I think I told you the story. I had my office in my house, and I was also drying, I have an herb closet mm-hmm. just off the therapy room.
Well, of
and
course
I was
you would.
drying. Yeah, of course. Well,
course you would.
My husband would say every room is an herb, right? I have seeds there, roots there, herbs.
Of course.
There's plants everywhere.
That's how it
and
should
things
be.
Macerating yeah. Patrick knows.
Yep.
Sure do.
I think most of our audience knows.
Yeah, I know. Isn't it so fun? Especially now during harvest season, it's like herbs everywhere. But I had a bunch of lemon balm drying, and I had reached a threshold where I couldn't smell it anymore. Yeah. But I did have one of my students come in for therapy, and he was generally a pretty down. He was dealing with a lot of physical ailments and a lot of, hard stuff with aging parents and so forth. And, so he came in and he just was like, mm-hmm. oh, I feel so good in here. I think there's a smell, but it's not just a smell. It's like a feeling.
Nice.
And he said, it feels so I'm relaxed yet uplifted. And I'm thinking, could it be the lemon balm?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure he was happy to,
yeah,
come for our meeting. But I think also, I didn't realize and that wasn't the only time. It happened multiple times with any of these mint family aromatic plants when they're drying. It's just a subtle, beautiful mm-hmm. transformation of a space. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I do think it speaks to what you were saying, Candace, like the limbic center or the pineal gland, that there are very slight shifts and one never knows what causes what or.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, my own experience going through the various things I've gone through has been that a lot of times the plants help move things on levels that I'm not even aware of, but they can see it. And so they help those things move, and they might be partly chemistry, but it's also the underpinnings of beliefs that are getting in my way of the block, the wall that I've hit. Well, mm-hmm. underneath that wall where I can see it, there is a foundation of earth. And the plants dig their roots in and say, okay, we're going to move this a little, move that a little. And look how we made a lovely crack in that cement. Look how that's opening up. See how you can get through there. And then the whole top of the wall starts to finally crumble. And it's because the plants offered a little bit of help,
Yeah.
And
a little bit or a lot. We never know.
Right.
I think one of the way I practice is very much grounded in determinism, mm-hmm. which says that it's kind of based on cause and effect, that there are no effects without causes.
Right.
And even if we don't know the cause, we make that assumption that there is a cause, so that everything is completely respect-worthy and justified,
Right.
100% of the time.
Yes.
That we humans, as animals, as mammals,
Mm-hmm.
and creatures of nature, are always doing the best we can all of the time. And I love the training that I've had in that foundation of, we're creatures of nature, just like the trees and all the other mammals and the birds and the fish,
Mm-hmm.
that we also can move about and go toward what feels good. And that's the purpose of our life, is to enjoy it. If a tree isn't faring well, we're not going to go up and, like if it's an apple tree, for instance, and it's not producing apples, we're not going to criticize it,
right?
Or have contempt for it or kick the apple tree. We're going to say, this is, hopefully we're able to be curious and say, I wonder what causes this.
Yeah.
And how
are
we going to address this? And that's what the work is.
Yeah.
And it's connected.
Yeah.
This whole ecology of being human in this world with the plants, with the herbs.
It's beautiful. Yes. Yes. And I love how, like, your fellow that cheered up with the lemon balm. I mean, you can look at that and say, okay, what is lemon balm telling me that he needs? I mean, lemon balm likes a good, sunny, open field. It likes just the right amount of water, not too much, but not too little. I mean, it kind of gives you some insights into some of the things that he needed to be thriving,
Yeah.
So the plants kind of,
Right. And you never know what, that is one thing. I mean, I think you can study the plant constituents until the end of time. I mean, the more you know, the more you know you don't know.
Right.
But, when you find a plant, or when a plant moves you that way, or, speaks to you, and I do hear.
Oh, yeah.
I hear them, and sometimes louder than others. And I think that's pretty exciting, because you never know, like the next, I don't know, that summer, for instance, he ended up finding someone who had a lot of compost. He found some pots, he found some rain barrels, and he ended up with a whole garden in his driveway.
Beautiful.
So, but we don't know what causes what, but it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And I, on any given day, knowing that I can reach for, some chamomile and some lavender and some, whatever I have, a little oat straw in my tea. It's so comforting.
Yes. I have to admit, I've been loving chamomile lately.
Me too.
It relaxes your stomach, and it relaxes all that like nervous tension that builds up when you feel like not entirely powerless, but I don't have the power to control events happening around me. They're so much bigger than me, and they involve so many people. And I'm just one little, pebble in the garden. So chamomile's like, hey, relax. It's all good.
Yeah. And chamomile says, I'm little too, but I'm potent.
Exactly.
I'm little, but I have this vision of having a chamomile. I want to make a chamomile bed in my yard.
Oh.
I think I want to do it with Roman chamomile. Have you ever heard of that?
But it sounds like lovely. Where you can literally lay down on it.
Yes.
Oh,
can you imagine? Especially where a lot of us are working from home right now. I know you're in your studio, but I'm doing most of my work from home right now. And can you imagine like taking a 10-minute break and laying in a bed of chamomile?
Get off of yet another Zoom meeting and be able to go outside and just say, okay, I need to breathe in some of this.
You're like plugging in.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds wonderful.
I do that. Yeah, so fun. And then another thing where the plants have found their way in is I do a weekly meditation. And it's a meditation group, and used to be at my cottage in Salem, which I've subsequently given up during COVID. And
Yeah.
So now we're doing Zoom meditations, but prior to that, the herb tea worked its way into the meditation session where we take a break and have some nice herb tea that I made just for the meditation. And, those folks who came, some of them had never had an herb tea.
Nice.
Like I take it for granted, but there are, you drink herb tea, but not everybody does.
But
and I think sometimes I can forget that. And that has meant a lot. And even during these COVID times, one of my students reached out and said, we could do meditation on Zoom.
Yeah.
So we've been doing that since April.
And do you sell your teas as well? Like could your meditation group potentially say, oh, we're going to buy whichever tea you say for this week?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sometimes they'll take it. Someone was, I don't know, she wasn't able to make it to meditation. She had some sort of, she had some surgery. And so that was one of the things. We sent her some herb tea so she could still have that, because it's true. You could still have that comfort. Something about the smell and the flavor of the tea brings you back.
Yeah. Yeah. It really, So can people join? Can anybody join this meditation group potentially?
Yeah, I have it on my, it's on my website, swampscottcounseling.com or RebeccaIngalls.com, either one. And it's one of the services that I offer, meditation. And right now I just ask that people contact me and I'll send them the link. And we do it every Wednesday night at 7.
Nice.
And, we do that. It's like a mindfulness meditation, but I weave in, the whole experience. And one of my students now has, two of them actually were interested in forest bathing. And one of them has started doing that as part of, because she's working on her computer all day long.
Oh, yeah.
And so now we've been taking walks in the woods, and it's so fun because I can identify some plants as we're walking, and it's just like another opening. And I think of you, Candace, it's like, it is all connected.
It is all connected. Totally. So, and people can get your teas through Palmer Pond Botanicals, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So that's palmerpond.com.
Palmerpond.com. Thank you. Yeah.
And I'll make sure I have links. So, okay, go through the links. How do people get a hold of you?
So that palmerpond.com, RebeccaIngalls.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I think that's it.
And swampscottcounseling.com.
Swampscott Counseling, yeah.
Okay.
They lead to the same place.
Okay.
To my therapy. Okay. My therapy practice. Yeah.
Cool. I will make sure the links are on the show notes page too for folks.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So do you have any last minute tips on getting through chaos and finding your tree, as it were?
Oh, yeah. Well, I do say, if you can get outside and just wander.
Nice.
And see what calls to you.
I like that.
I so trust these plants, these beautiful, more than human creatures.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're so much older than us. We share DNA, but they have so much more.
Oh, yeah.
And so much to offer in the way of comfort and health.
Yeah.
And love.
Yeah, they so do. They so do. Thank you so very much for being with us today.
This was so exciting. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And as always, put an herb on it.
The statements made about herbs and products on this podcast have not been evaluated by the United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. All information provided on this podcast or any affiliated websites is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for advice from your physician or other healthcare professional. You should not use the information on this podcast and its affiliated websites for a diagnosis or treatment of any health problem. Always consult with a healthcare professional before starting any new vitamins, supplements, diet, or exercise program before taking any medication, or if you have or suspect you might have a health problem. Any testimonials, questions, or case studies are based on individual results and do not constitute a guarantee that you will achieve the same results.